Hi, my name is Steve Rahi. I am a premier field engineer specializing in management technologies. Today's session will focus on a kind of a hidden feature, at least as of this recording, one that's not really front and center, but one that is very, very powerful in Configuration Manager called the Admin Service. I consider this kind of a hidden gem. Once you realize the power of this, that we document and that we don't document, it's pretty amazing, right? So let me give acknowledgement as we get started to a few folks. We have an MVP named Adam Gross who's done some really, really good work blogging through the generations of the admin service. So specifically, we introduced this in technical preview, first RTM'd or showed up in the release product in 1810. Has changed a lot since then. This session is based on the 1906 version, right? So just know that. But Adam has some detail through all of that and has done some pretty amazing things with it. So definitely take a look at his blog, Adam Gross at www.asquaredozen.com. Really good stuff. Then also there's a blog that talks about using ConfigMgr to administer over the internet. So that gives you a hint where we're going. Yes, you can use the administration service both locally on-prem and through the Cloud Management Gateway if you have that configured. That was also done by an MVP. Her name is Sandy. And if you search for Use ConfigMgr Admin Service over the internet, you'll find that. And then certainly our docs. Our docs are not really built out yet very well. There's a lot of nuances that you'll see in this presentation that are not really documented fully yet, but that is planned. Some of the updates to the docs are planned. So even in our docs, it'll be more clear. That said, let's jump forward. So here's the agenda. I want to talk about what the admin service is. Again, it's kind of this hidden gem that maybe you haven't heard of before. Maybe you've just glossed over and didn't realize the power at your fingertips. So I want to talk about what it is, why you care, and then go through the requirements for it, the components, show how it works, configuring it, wind up with some troubleshooting tips and tricks, and go from there. So what is this thing called the administration service? Well, put simply, it is a web service that allow you to access ConfigMgr data for various purposes. So for years, various customers have built their own web service for use during things like task sequencing to provide access to data that's in ConfigMgr. And so this web service really eliminates the need for you to build your own custom web service when accessing configuration data. So we call it a web service, and it is totally a web service. If you go into IIS expecting to see the administration service there, it is not there. This is not hosted in IIS. So I kind of parallel this to SQL reporting services. So whenever SQL reporting services first came out, it was hosted in IIS. Now, if you look at modern versions of SQL reporting services, you will call SQL reporting services through your browser, just like you always have. But if you go into IIS, you will not find SQL reporting services there at all. Same thing here, right? We kind of self-host the administration service. So the administration service, being a web service, provides access to data. How do we actually get that data? The answer is through the REST API. Web service totally based on the REST API. So the same URL format to interact with the API. This does run as a service, which I will show you in a little bit, right? Now, read only, and notice I put an asterisk there. So if you look at our documentation, the documentation calls out that we are supporting read only, and that is absolutely true, right? But the admin service is a whole lot more than read only. If you just go look at Adam Gross's blog, he provides several beyond read only examples for what you can do with the admin service, and we'll certainly expand the capabilities of the admin service beyond read-only and document that whenever we support it. There's a lot that you can do. Just know your mileage may vary right now if you're using beyond read-only, but the interesting thing, and you'll see one of these things, one of these examples coming up, is even in what we have supported today, we are using the admin service for beyond read-only, and I will show you that as well. So just be aware. And then the question, is this a WMI replacement? And the answer to that is Yeah, we'll see where that goes. It's kind of complicated, but you can definitely see the direction to use the admin service instead of WMI in places. So there's actually two, kind of to preview a little bit, two what are called routes with the admin service. One is called the WMI route, and this is where the administration service is basically a wrapper around the existing WMI functionalities. Then there's another route called V1, and this is where the administration service supports its own native implementation of config manager providers, which doesn't rely on WMI. And this is what you will see in a minute, where the ConfigMan console leverages this route, if you will, to do things beyond just a WMI call. Right, so it's a limited section of the Config Manager console for now, but definitely I'll show that to you here in just a second. So that's what the admin service is. Now, why do we care? Well, having the ability to use something like the admin service to easily access config manager data is huge, right? Being able to really enrich your deployments, your management experience by accessing live data. Examples might include task sequence variables, right? Application approval workflows, which you will see those both in just a minute, right? Application options to support operations, right? So if you want to access or provide data access for third parties, let me give you a specific example where this comes to play. So there's a customer, a service provider that I've been talking with, who has as a vision to supply a service that will basically host Config Manager for a number of different customers. So they envision having hundreds of Config Manager implementations for customers that they would want to manage and so on. They don't want to have to click into every single one of these instances to manage them. They don't want to have to get data from each one of these instances manually. And so we've been talking about using the admin service to connect programmatically and pull data using one of their back-end management process to automate a lot of this. It's a perfect solution for being able to do this. Another example might be database access. Through the years, many organizations have basically wanted to provide config manager data access to various groups for reporting purposes and different things. This has often been done by replicating the config manager database maybe to an external service, maybe using the data warehouse service point. Those are okay options. I definitely prefer the data warehouse service point. But this is now another one. If you want to provide your colleagues, your teams, access to config manager data, but not necessarily give them access to the console, directly don't want to install the console on their system, then this is an option, right? This is an option for sure. Secure connections. So the administration service is accessed using an SSL connection over port 443. The traffic is secured by a cert. It's either the enhanced HTTP cert, which is what we recommend, or a PKI generated cert. Now there's differences depending on which one you use. There's things to be aware of. I'll show them to you, right? But both are options. Both are secure, right? And help protect your data, maybe more than what your own custom-built web service would have. And then in terms of use cases and scenarios, we'll talk about several of them. So first of all, one thing I should point out is the admin service is enabled by default. This is not something that requires a great deal of work to set up, right? In 1906, it is enabled by default. I believe in 1902, 1810, I'm not so sure, I don't remember, but this is based on 1906. We can support with the admin service on-prem operations, right? We can also support internet-based operations through the Cloud Management Gateway. And then there are options, as I mentioned already, for the admin console to access data through the admin service. If you want to turn that on to at least see how it works, that's a really great place to start first, just to make sure that the admin service is functioning the way that it should, right? But we'll get into some scenarios as we go on that will show the admin service being used in different ways, right? Being called in different ways. What are the requirements for the admin service? Well, we need .NET 4.5, right? Again, based on 1906, we need .NET 4.5 installed. If we were using Config Manager 1810, that would need to be .NET 4.5.2, but we're talking about 1906. So Config Manager 1810 Plus, that's where it was first introduced into the production release of Config Manager. Definitely would recommend being on 1906, some significant enhancements since its initial release. And again, SSL communication, just talked about that. We do require certificates. Now, one thing that I'll point out, you might see in documentation somewhere the idea of shifting the admin service into a non-SSL mode of communication. That was possible early on, absolutely not supported. The ability to do that has been removed as of 1906 because securing your communication is really, really important. Again, by one of two certificates, either the enhanced HTTP or the PKI generated. The way we learn about these certs is that we bind them to IIS, which I just said earlier. You won't see the admin service in IIS, but yet we will pull the cert from IIS to use that with the admin service, as you'll see in just a minute. So here's a little bit of trying to understand what components are needed. So certainly the SMS provider. So the admin service is implemented on the SMS provider. So each installed SMS provider will automatically support the administration service. So that means if you have one provider, if you have 5 providers, all of them are going to automatically be configured to support the admin service and support the admin service. So you need the administration service itself. So that actually is a component of the executive, right? The administration service certificate is bound to the SSL channel in IIS, as I've alluded to. And then again, just to call back to the administration service is kind of self-hosted. It's not hosted directly through IIS. So not really a component of the admin service, but really, and not really a requirement for the admin service to work. But if you're going to use the admin service, you need to have something that will call the admin service to provide data. And that list of somethings can be really whatever you imagine it to be. Some of the things we'll talk about that I'll show you in the session would be accessing the admin service through the browser, accessing the admin service through PowerShell, using Power BI. I'll show you the Config Manager console. There's others. So if you look at the Adam Gross blog as an example, you'll see accessing the data through Postman as another example of ways you can pull it, right? And others as well that you might come up with, that you might need. Then I list Cloud Management Gateway, and I put an asterisk there. I only put an asterisk there because if you don't need the Cloud Management Gateway unless you're wanting to access the administration service from clients that are on the internet, right? Or from processes, I should say, that are on the internet. Let me clarify that. Whenever you have the administration service available through the Cloud Management Gateway, that in no way, shape, or form means that you only can access it from clients that are running on the internet. Not at all. I'm going to, in an example coming up, show you running a query against the Cloud Management Gateway, the admin service on the Cloud Management Gateway, just from my desktop, which is not a Config Manager client of my Config Manager infrastructure. All right. And then finally, the idea of routes. I mentioned routes already, but I want to visually illustrate this a bit. So we have the overall administration service here. Right now, we have 2 routes that we support. So routes are ways that we can obtain data through the administration service. So one route is WMI, okay? And we can pull any data that's in WMI through the WMI route, to which I can somewhat hear you saying, yeah, but that's great, Steve. I can pull data from the administration service or from the WMI namespaces through code already, no problem. Yeah, that's true. Except you can't do that whenever you have processes that need that data on the internet, unless you have some sort of way to get to your infrastructure and pull the data back. In our world, with the admin service, that's the Cloud Management Gateway. If you're on the internet and you try to pull data directly from the WMI namespaces, you're not getting it. With Cloud Management Gateway and the admin service, you absolutely can, right? And there's some other reasons, probably too, that would benefit, but that's enough. And then we have what's called the V1 route. And what this is what the admin console uses. So if you enable the admin console, the portion of the admin console that can use the admin service to do so, then that's going to be enabled by the V1 route. And then there's this thing that I put in the middle, $ metadata. So that is, as you're looking at this, you might wonder, what can I access through the WMI route? Well, you probably know, if you're familiar with WMI at all, you kind of know what's there. And so, but still, you can look at the WMI route and see, and let me also be specific, the WMI route is focused on the SMS provider on the site server, which means access to site server data, things that might be in the console, in the database, whatever. I mention that only because we have a WMI namespace that we rely on the clients as well. Not really what we're talking about here, is more server-side data. If you want to see what's actually in the V1 route, then you can use the $ metadata tag to pull that specific detail and see what's there, right? So that you know what you can query. And I'll show you how to do that, as we go along. Okay, so the first part of this discussion, we're going to focus on prem, and I'm going to spend most of my time here just to show you how the admin service works and give you some concepts, right? And then we'll shift to the Cloud Management Gateway and do one scenario there. So on-prem first. So here's a really simple diagram to kind of illustrate how this works, right? So with on-prem, you either have an administrator who is interacting with the admin service to retrieve data. You might want to be pulling that through browser, through script, through the ConfigMgr console, whatever. And that admin needs to access the data, right? Now, how does the admin go access that data? Well, if you're in the browser or if you're in a script, then you need to know how the admin service is accessed, right? If you're using the ConfigMgr console, we already know how to access the admin service, and actually that's a good place for you to learn how to access the admin service through looking at the calls that are made from the ConfigMgr console and recorded in the admin service log, which I'll show you in a little bit. But right here, I just try to, I give you this URL format to show you how you would make a call to the admin service on-prem. So you would provide the FQDN name of your server. Now, certainly if you're on the server, you can use localhost, but if not, you'll provide the FQDN of your provider server, the one hosting the admin service, then admin service, and then provide the route. That's either going to be WMI or V1. And by the way, these are case sensitive, right? Be aware. And then provide, submit the request. So if you're in WMI, that might be SMS_collection as an example. So again, case sensitive, capital SMS_C collection, right? Would pull data about the collections in your environment. Now you can drill deeper. I'm showing you some very simple things up front, but you can drill deeper. I'll show you examples of how you drill deeper here in a minute, right? Then that request would go to the SMS REST provider service running on the provider, the admin service, and then would be handled, the request processed, so through the provider, through whatever calls need to be made, whatever, and then that data is returned to the caller. Well, that's one route. It could be that you actually don't have a user involved. You do a deployment that needs to access the administration service. That could be a task sequence. It could be application approval. It could be other things. Same thing. We would need to be able to call the admin service. So maybe in the task sequence, we're running a script that is going to call the admin service for various things, and we need to use the same format, right? If you're using the application approval workflow, we already know how to call the admin service, and the detail we will provide will already include links to the admin service. Again, I'll show that to you as we go along. All right. So to the demo side, starting to figure out how to set this thing up, how to use it. So the first thing in general that I want to talk about is you do need a cert. It either is going to be the enhanced HTTP cert, which is recommended, right, or PKI. So let's talk about both. So the enhanced HTTP cert, let me pull in the ConfigMgr console just to show you what I'm talking about. All right, so the console is loading up here. And so if we go into administration and go under site configuration, go to sites, and then go to properties on the site. And finally, go into communication security. This option, use configuration manager generated certs for HTTP site systems, that is enabling enhanced HTTP. I have that enabled in my lab. Now, I'm not going to disable this at all through the process of this lab, but you're going to see me in a minute shift to a PKI cert while leaving that in place. Not a big deal. You can shift the cert in IIS while leaving that enabled, just calling that out as something you'll see in a minute, and FYI, right? But that's where you turn it on. And we do recommend it. Right now, there's some interesting details about using the enhanced HTTP cert, because that cert is not trusted when you try to call data through it. You're going to see me call the admin service through the browser, and you're going to see a certificate warning because that cert is not trusted. We can't go validate the certificate chain. You can still work with the cert. It's still a very easy cert to work with, but you have to understand the limitations and kind of where you might need to shift in a PKI cert versus the enhanced HTTP cert, right? Even through PowerShell, we can manage the cert warnings effectively, no problem. In other things like Power BI, you might not be able to do it as easily, and you might need a PKI cert, right? But you'll see all those things as we go forward. Now, continuing with the configuration on-prem, right? Thinking through the admin service just on-prem right now. So we don't have to turn on the admin service. It is enabled by default. We do configure the cert just like I showed you. But then we have another option that we can configure on-prem. And that's to have the console itself leverage the admin service. So for that, I'm going to go into hierarchy settings of the site. And right down here on the bottom, enable the Config Manager console to use the administration service. That's an option. Again, I think it's a great way to verify that your admin service is working. And I will just call out that this option does not mean the entire console will use the admin service. It today is only one small section, which is right here under the security node. But it's a good way to check. And then finally, you do need a user account. And so that probably is such a simple requirement that it's easily kind of breezed past. But you definitely need a user account that has rights to Config Manager. If you don't, then that user account cannot access data, right? And on-prem, that probably already maybe exists, maybe not. Like if you have other user or other peers that want to use the admin service, then you would need to grant them the rights in Config Manager. Don't have to give them a Config Manager console, but definitely need to make sure they are users in Config Manager. Okay, so let's get rid of that. Now, the fun stuff. Let's actually go see this work. Okay, so scenario one. Did I? Yeah. Not yet for scenario one. So I want to get into the basics of this and just show you this thing working with the two routes, the WMI route and the V1 route. So let me pull up a browser. I'm going to pull up a browser, and very simply, I'm going to go in and call the admin service. So this browser is running on my machine. So let me just, I'll do it both ways. HTTPS. And you already see that I've got some things there. SA1 dot, can't type and talk at the same time. And then I'm going to call admin service. And very simply, I'm going to call the WMI route and hit enter. Right now, this is the cert problem I was telling you about, right? You will get this, and it's because I'm currently using the enhanced HTTP cert, and you see that I cannot go forward at this space, right, because of it. Well, instead, what I'm going to do to give me a little bit of a different experience where I can go forward is I'm going to use localhost. All right? And so now I have the ability to continue onto the site, and I get a JSON that's presented, and I'm looking for just the WMI route. Basically everything that I can access through WMI, I open it up. It's got a lot, as you can see, with the spinning circle there, but these are all the different routes that I can access through the WMI namespace. And if you're familiar at all with WMI, you already know the detail. Now, if I want to present this in a nicer format, I can just go out here and put on the metadata tag, right? And it's going to dump out in a much prettier, more readable format all of the information in the classes, the properties, everything that I can call through the WMI route. Well, since that works, then it's easy enough to go through and do the same thing. Come on. No, it's going to make me do it again. That's fine. It's easy enough to go through and call the V1 route the same way. If the thing will catch up. Come on. Okay, good. There. Call the V1 route the same way. And so now this is the data that you will see in the V1 route, which is what supports the admin console. So here's console administration, different things, reporting. Here's CM pivot status, different things. You can kind of get a hint as to the kinds of things you might be able to call beyond read-only, with certain ones of these already. User application request, all of these different things. A lot smaller of a list, but those are the items that are supported right now with the admin service. All right. Pretty easy to call, right? But all this data yet is at your fingertips. So very cool. Now, let's go work through a couple of scenarios so we can see how this works, some of the limitations, whatever. So I just showed you how to call the admin service. I'm not going to go through the simple details again, but I will call one more. So let me pull the ConfigMgr console back in, right? And pull back up the browser, and I will stick with localhost. Easier to type to. And admin service. And WMI. And this time I want to list out the collections that I have in ConfigMgr. So easy as that. I get the same warning, continue to website, and now I get the same JSON that I can open up. And here are all of the collections in ConfigMgr. And this is not easy on the eye to read, but if you're managing this with PowerShell or whatever, you can just have PowerShell sift through the list and do some different things there, and easier, right? So that's kind of calling. It's really pretty easy to call the admin service through a website. Again, the only challenge I have is that I'm getting a certificate error, but I've explained that and easy enough to continue. Now, how do I do this in PowerShell? Well, I'm going to show you two ways. Let me get rid of this. So I'm going to open up ISE, and I am going to run this as an admin. All right, cool. There's two scripts. First is this one. Open. So this is a very easy PowerShell script, right? I actually pulled this off of Adam Gross's blog, as I recall, just as an easy example. So here, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get credentials. Why? Because, again, the user account is critical for ensuring that you're able to access the data through the admin service. Then I've got my hard-coded site server name right there. And then I'm telling, as $function, what area of the admin service I want to access. Then I'm putting it all together here. And I'm using the invoke REST method to call it all and passing in my credentials, right? And then I just display the result. So let's go run that and see how it works. So I'm going to hit run. It's going to pop up a credentials box, and I'm going to put in my local credentials. And this should be valid in ConfigMgr. I'm going to hit enter. And now I get an error message. The error message says the underlying connection was closed, could not establish a trust relationship for the SSL TLS secure channel. Why in the world might that be? Well, you guessed it. It's the cert, right? I'm using an enhanced HTTP cert. It's the same problem that I saw in the browser, except in script. I can't click bypass, right? I have to handle it a different way in the script. So let me show you how I can engineer the script to handle it a different way. Open up this version of the script right here with certificate bypass. So this is the exact same script from this point forward. From line 19 forward, it's the exact same script, except, well, I was messing with this a little bit for the Cloud Management Gateway. Neither here nor there. I will get rid of that because I have a different script. For the Cloud Management Gateway, I forgot to delete that. Not a big deal, it was a comment. But anyway, the script's the same. The only thing that's different is up here. I pulled this example from this blog. Again, you can do this how I wouldn't recommend using this in production, right? But let me explain it. So what happens is this section of the script basically says it doesn't matter what kind of cert validation results are returned, just accept them all, right? So if you get a failed cert validation, just go ahead and flip that to say that everything's fine. Trust all cert policy, right? And then you're good. Now, you can do this a couple of different ways. I do this in this script in this way just because it's easy, and no matter what the cert is, it will come back and return okay. In a production environment, I don't recommend that. You would want to more hone in on the enhanced HTTP cert and only allow the cert to be trusted if you know it, right? That way you protect your environment against unauthorized certs or whatever. But for demo, it's easy. And so let's just go ahead and run this again. I'll clear this out. And now I'll run this with the cert bypass. And I'll get the same prompt. And now, because of this cert bypass, I call the admin service and I get a list back of all the collections. And you can see the detail here, and you see the list of collections that come out. And so easy enough, right? Easy enough to bypass a cert, to use it, and so on. Now, let me go to another example, and this example would be using Power BI. So Power BI, very powerful. Being able to access the admin service through Power BI, very powerful, to pull data and do reporting and so on. So let's launch Power BI. So that's coming up. And as soon as I can, I'm going to select on Get Data to pull up my data connection. All right, so here I'm going to click on Get Data, and then I'm going to be provided a list of ways I can do that. I'm just going to search for OData, and there's my OData. Oops, try that again, Get Data, or let's try OData again. There, let's click on it, go. And so it's going to ask me for a URL. So I'm just going to type in my admin service URL. And sorry for the silence while I'm doing this, just can't type and talk at the same time. I'm going to hit OK, right? There's my URL, and it's going to tell me that it can't access the data because the underlying connection was closed, just the same as before. Well, let's just be complete here, and let's try this again, since I am on the site server, right? And just check what would happen if I use localhost. So here we go. And I will type in with localhost now. There we go. And same thing, right? Same problem. Can't do it. So here's the thing. With Power BI, we've actually reached a place that I don't know of an easy way to bypass the cert. And you might decide here you can't really handle bypassing the cert. You just want Power BI to work directly without having to have any errors, and that's cool. So at this stage, maybe we need to switch and use a PKI generated cert. Now, the process of generating a PKI cert is not difficult. We document it. It's just a simple web cert, right? So I'm not going to go through that because I've already got a PKI cert, but I am going to go into IIS and change it. So I'm going to edit bindings. And here is my SSL port. I currently am using the enhanced HTTP cert, and I'm going to change it to this one because I know that is my PKI cert. I can confirm it by viewing it and going to details. And then here, this is server application. Here's the template web cert for admin service that I created, so I know it's the right one. And I hit OK, no problem, right? But by simply doing this, the admin service has not picked up that cert. In order to pick up the cert, you need to restart the admin service, and I'm going, since it's a component of the executive, I'm just going to go into the registry here, component, executive, etc., provider, SMS REST provider, and say that I want the requested operation to be a stop. stop. And then the admin service will stop. Great, it's already stopped. And then I want to restart it. Great, the admin service is running. So with that, I've actually asked the admin service to restart. It's going to go pick up the third-party PKI cert. I can confirm that in the SMS_REST provider log as soon as it loads. All right, and then we go to the bottom here, and we can see that it restarted. We can see that it validated this thumbprint. We can see it is not issued by ConfigMgr, meaning it's not enhanced HTTP, and that we are good. Right? We started with that cert. So now we are using a trusted PKI-generated cert. So let's go try that again, where we connect up to Power BI. So get data, more, and then OData. All right, here, that's cool. Go. And now I'm going to provide the same URL. I'll use the FQDN. And now, if we hit OK, we'll process for a minute, and that's all fine. I don't really care. Just connect. Let me retry. Let me close and reopen Power BI. 1 second, I'll be back. Okay, so relaunch Power BI, hitting Get Data. I will go find OData again. There we go. Connect. And try that again and see what happens. Hit OK. And this time it's going to work, looks like. So I've pulled up the data out of the V1 channel. Now I could go build whatever I wanted to, right, and do whatever Power BI dashboard I wanted to. I'm just showing this to you as an example, right? It's an option. You can get this data. You can use it for all sorts of different purposes, right, without problem. All right, so that's various ways that we can access the data in the console. There's other ways, you could even use, as Adam Gross blogs about, you can call data with CMPivot. There's actually a really interesting scenario that he did in his blog where you can use CMPivot to not only understand problems on a client, but then use scripts to go remediate those problems all through the admin service. So really, really cool stuff. Definitely recommend going to check it out. How about scenario 2? So this would be where we're actually calling the admin service through something like a deployment. So here, a task sequence. So let me show you what I'm going to do here. So basically, here's the script that I want to run. This is the cert that is going to, again, trust all communication, all certs. I'm not going to block anything. I don't need it, really, because I'm using my PKI cert now, but I'm still going to use it as part of the script. And now here's the section of the script that will go and pull the boundary information out of the admin service. Notice that in the script now, I'm passing my username and password, and I've blacked out the password so that just because I obviously need to keep that secret. But here's the thing. So what can you tell by looking at this? I'm passing a local on-prem username and password, right? Here's the other thing that you might look at. You might look at this and say, well, Steve, I'm glad we can call this admin service through a task sequence, but I don't want to have to hard code my username and password into a task sequence. And I totally agree, and I totally get it, right? I did this here for convenience. If I were doing this in a production environment, I would use maybe variables to pass down the username and password in a secure way, right? There's a couple of different ways you can implement that depending on your environment and where you are and so on. But this is on-prem, so that would be how I would do it, would be using variables in that scenario. So this is just for convenience and to show that within the task sequence, I can code in the credentials, either hard-coded in the script or pulled from variables in the task sequence in a more secure way, and use those to call the admin service. Right? So let's actually go see that work. So here, I'll show you what I have built. It's not very exciting, right? It's just going to call the admin service from a task sequence. So here, though, I have my task sequence. This is a non-imaging task sequence. You could do this just as well with an imaging task sequence. I'll edit that, and here's my run PowerShell script command. That's the script that I just showed you, and that's all it's going to do. It's just going to run this script. I have this deployed already, so let me go grab the machine where it's deployed. All right, so here is one of my machines. Here's the task sequence. I'm going to go ahead and run that. I've run it before. I'm just going to go ahead and reinstall it so you'll see it do its thing here. So there it goes, and it's running the script. Let me go ahead and pull up the SMSTS log here. So here's the SMSTS log. It finished. And this isn't very exciting, but let's just go back in the TS log where we ran that. So scrolling back up. Scrolling back up. Here's running the PowerShell script, exit code of 0. Nothing really in here to tell you that we interact with the admin service except this line, because I told you the PowerShell script was going to run and pull data about boundaries. So I know that that ran. Now, how do I know that it was successful? Well, pretty easy. The way that I go check that, let me close all that down and pull this away. Pull the admin console back in. The way that I check that is to look at the admin service log itself. And the admin service log is where we record all communication with the admin service, right? We'll look at this log a couple more times coming up, really important stuff in here. And so letting that load, we can tell the last entry here was asking for detail about SMS boundary. We see the user that was using the task sequence and submitting that forward was me, because I was running that on the system. And then this is a GET request, right? A GET request. And again, the reason this was there is because I'd hard-coded that into the script, that it's a GET request. So we'll come back to that in a minute. In fact, let me leave that open, and I'll pause it for a moment, and minimize it. Okay, now, another scenario, let's pull this up just temporarily. Another scenario would be if you wanted to run a script. Now, basically, I'm going to take this same script and run it against the admin service using the scripts node of the console. So here is what I'm referring to with that. I've got a script here, and what I'm going to do is go to my device, my test device. Let's use the same one, and right-click Run Script right up here, and choose it. Okay, so I'm going to hit Next and Go. Right, and the way that I know that the script is running is I will pull back in the test client. Here it is, and go to the logs, and I will see a scripts log. So I'll go pull that open, and I can see that the script is running. In fact, it just finished up, right? And results are sent, and it was successful. Again, that's really the only thing. I can translate that to the GUIDs and so on if I want to, but that's the way that I would know that it ran and that it ran successfully. So let me pull this out of the way, and I will also close that because it hasn't received notification yet. That's okay. But again, scripts, really easy example. You can use the high-speed notification channel either on-prem or even through the Cloud Management Gateway, which we haven't talked about yet, to run a script on a client. And then maybe you have, in a scenario where you would run a script, you have clients that are maybe in different configurations. You don't know what the configurations are, but you know which ones you need to control for. And so you would let the admin service run, or the script would call the admin service to actually pull back the detail maybe that you need, and then you would take actions based on that, right? So there's so many examples of where you could use the admin service to get some of the detail that you need, right? Very, very important stuff. Okay, so scenario 4 now is the ConfigMgr console. So I told you the ConfigMgr console itself could be engineered to use the ConfigMgr or the admin service. Let me show that to you one more time. I already showed it to you, but let's make sure we understand where we enable that is in hierarchy settings, and right here, right? And then once we do that, it's only these nodes here. Oh, by the way, I didn't show you. So let me re-enable this. So the log proceeds, and so this is the script. That's not the script. I might have missed it. Where did I go? Either way. So the script ran through the admin service and called this, but I might have anyway. So it did work, right? I'll minimize this again. One of the things while I'm in here, though, I'll tell you. So this one, you can see that it's calling in and so on. These are not requests that I made. These are requests that the service itself is making to ensure its health. It is healthy, right? So it does periodically self-check. Okay, so back to the topic at hand, the admin console. So it's only those areas under security right now that are supported for the admin service. And so what I want to do is pull up the log and kind of put it to the side. We'll come back to it. And I'm going to just access a node, security roles. So there it goes. So I accessed it. And so you see the log rolled forward, and you see that it's accessing the metadata values from the admin service for the security node and passing that forward and sent back the request, and everything was good, and request came back, right? So the point is, this section of the console uses the admin service, but let's look at something again, call something out specifically for one of these requests. Notice that this is a GET request. So I mentioned as we started that we do support read for the admin console. We don't support beyond that yet, although it is very possible to do, except that we ourselves are already using the admin service beyond just a read, right? So let me go down to security scopes as an example. All right, so I have a test one here. I'm just going to remove it. I'm going to say delete, yes. And so if I then go to my admin service log and go to the latest transaction here, then notice that this now is not a GET request, it's a delete request. If I go and add a security role back, or a security scope back, it would then be a post request. So those are definitely not just read-only requests, they are editable requests, or requests that edit data. And so very clearly, already, the way we use the admin service, we are doing beyond just read requests, all right? All right, so let's go on and see what's next. So scenario 5. Here, I want to show you the application approval. So the application approval workflow is not really what we're talking about here, but the fact that you can use the application approval workflow with the admin service. Specifically, if you configure, let me just show you. If you configure a deployment to require approval, right? Let me go find that. Again, not about so much the approval workflow, but just showing you kind of end to end. If I go to application management and show you an application that requires approval, so this one is the only one I have deployed. So I did say, here's my deployment to require approval. Right here, administrator must approve the request. Now, when you're going through the wizard to set this, one of the options you get, if you have it configured, well, even if you have the new application workflow approval request enabled in your console, which is a feature, right? There are two options: the standard application approval workflow, which just puts your approvals over here, or the new one where you can actually include email. So in addition to having the request over here, you can have the approver receive an email asking for approval. And whenever you set this up through the wizard, you can supply the email address that you want to send those approval requests to. Far too much that I wanted to go into, but still for completeness. And so I sent this out to a device and asked for the application to be installed. So I have an approval request that I've sent to myself, and I did get an email. Let me show you that email, right? So this is just a standard email address requesting approval, and there's links down here for the approver to either approve or deny. But notice whenever I click on this, it's actually giving you a URL to the admin service, right? Depending on what action you want to take. So clearly, pretty easily, the admin service is being used here to get that done, right? Cool. Building on this. So I mentioned, these are simple examples that I've shown you trying to illustrate how this works and the options, but building on this, here's some additional examples. of how you can use the admin service. And believe me, this isn't even touching the hem of the garment. But being able to retrieve devices, we've seen this format, no problem. We're just going to call this WMyClass SMSR system. But you don't have to just get a list of machines. You could focus in on one device by passing in a parameter. This is the item key or the machine ID or resource ID of the machine, and this will pull back just detail about that machine. Or you could even go further and pull in just the operating system detail about that machine. And so many other possibilities you can use, but just showing, it's not just the simple calls that I've made. There's a lot of more detail you can put in this, but still with the simplicity of the command line and just tacking on additional details and so on. All right. So shifting gears, we talked about how we can use the admin service on-prem, showed a lot of examples. You can also use this through the Cloud Management Gateway, but it's different, right? A little bit different. Let me share those details, right? Okay. So in terms of how it works, same kind of thing. You're going to have a deployment try to access the administration service. You could have a user do it too, but really in this sense, maybe it's probably more of an automated deployment. Is going to go through Azure, through the ConfigMgr Cloud Management Gateway, and submit the request to the admin service. We're going to get the response back and forward it back. But notice this. This is a different URL format, right? Here this kind of looks like the Cloud Management Gateway, it's string itself. It's not, it's different. But specifically in the ID here, right? So I'll just show you. Well, I won't show you, but that number would be different. If you look in the network tab of the control panel applet on a client enabled for the CMG, that number is not the same. But either way, you would submit this as a URL whenever you're making a request to the admin service through the Cloud Management Gateway. So that's one difference, right? Now, in terms of other differences, so I want to show you this. So let me pull back in the ConfigMgr console. Over here. There we go. So we haven't talked about enabling the admin service to work through the ConfigMgr or through the Cloud Management Gateway. So if I go up to servers and site system roles and then pick the server that hosts my Cloud Management Gateway, or my provider, sorry, right here, SMS provider, and then just go to properties on that provider, there's a checkbox, allow ConfigMgr Cloud Management Gateway traffic for admin service. I enable that, and that permits the traffic, but there's some more concepts I need to understand. So there's a concept of administration service endpoints. We've talked about the on-prem endpoint so far, right? There's two of them, on-prem endpoint and a Cloud Management Gateway endpoint. The on-prem endpoint handles all requests for on-prem traffic. You call this endpoint when you're on-prem, right? All the examples we just discussed uses the on-prem endpoint. Now, if you're accessing data through the Cloud Management Gateway, then you need to use that endpoint. Handles all of the requests from the internet, right? This endpoint does not require a client. That's absolutely critical to understand. You can do this from anywhere as long as you have rights to do so, right? So how do you know what your endpoint is? Well, it's actually pretty easy. All you have to do is go into SQL and run this query, right? This query right here. And you will get back your endpoint. So this is my endpoint, right? And you know it's admin service because it ends with admin service. So if I'm actually calling the admin service through Cloud Management Gateway, I have to use this endpoint. Now, another bit of detail, so you have to have this, right? So we'll use that in a minute. Another bit of detail. You're calling the admin service through the Cloud Management Gateway. In order for the Cloud Management Gateway to operate, the Cloud Management Gateway needs a couple of different web applications when you configured it, the client app and the service app, right? You will also need to supply that detail when you're calling the admin service through the Cloud Management Gateway. I'll show you how I did that in script in just a minute, but before I get there, let me show you the applications configured in my Azure environment. All right, so pulling that in. So here, if I go to Azure Active Directory, you will see the app registrations that I have. Okay, app registrations. And so there's the service app and there's the client app. We need to access both. And so here's my my client app. Here's my service app. So let's look at both. So here's my service app. And what I will need is the application ID and also the URL, right? Application ID or the client ID and the URL, right? And then if I go back to my client app, then there's a tag I need to add for authentication. It's right here, right up here. This needs to be enabled for authentication, right? To pass through from the admin service to the cloud management gateway and so on. Now, you could, in the blog post that I referred from Sandy, she has the blog post called Use ConfigMgr Administration Service over the Internet. That describes a process where she goes and creates a custom application and puts these tags on them. That is not required. She prefers to do it. Some people might prefer to do it so that you have a dedicated application for the administration service. But you, again, do have to give it authentication into the environment and so on. Either way, both options will work. And this is the option I chose, is just to change the default app. And I will show you in a minute where we use these. Let me get rid of that. Now, the other thing is you're going to need a user account. And you're going to need a user account specifically that is allowed to use the Cloud Management Gateway and then also approved to use ConfigMgr. So that user account, because of that, the user account that you're going to use must reside in Azure and be able to authenticate through Azure AD. That user account also must have rights to ConfigMgr. So you're going to see me use a user account. Let me just show you here. Here's my admin users. This one is, or this one, either one. This one is a full administrator. It is an Azure AD account. I have an Azure token. If you have any, and so this is an admin user, so you know that I have rights to ConfigMgr. Do I have rights to add, to authenticate in Azure? That's really a question of what's out there. So if I look at all of my users, here is my, where is it? Here's that user account. If I go to properties, then I do see that I have the Azure tokens. And so because I have the Azure AD user IDs and tokens and whatever filled out, I'm good to go. So as long as I use that user account, I can authenticate with the Cloud Management Gateway and ConfigMgr and be able to use the admin service. If you use a user account that does not have both of those, then you're going to fail, right? All right, so let me get rid of this from the picture and continue on. So here's scenario 6, using the Cloud Management Gateway. So a couple of things that I want to talk through. Again, talked about the user have to have those rights. A browser. I'm not going to show you a browser connecting through the Cloud Management Gateway to the admin service. You can make that work. It's not as straightforward as what I just showed you with the browser and demonstrated previously, but it is workable, right? What I will show you is running a script through the PowerShell and the Cloud Management Gateway. So let me grab a script and open it up. Here's ISE, the script's loaded. So basically, the first part of this script is just to say, again, another way of saying it doesn't matter what the cert validation says, return true. Now, in my case, I'm on a PKI generated cert now, and shouldn't be necessary, but this is here just to make sure. And then the script goes through and it tries to locate a couple of modules because we do have to validate now with Azure AD. So we're validating in this script through the PowerShell Intune Authority module. So we're checking, is it there? If not, we need to go down and grab it, right? And then we also need to validate and get an Azure token. So here we're going to call getting the Azure token. In order to get the token, I have to specify the detail. So I have to specify the name of my tenant. This is the name of my tenant. It is not the username, it's just the domain name, if you will. Here's the client ID, right, from the client app that I showed you. And then here's the URL of the service, right? So you need both apps. You need the client app and you need the service app. I showed you the client ID, showed you where you get the application ID off of it, which is also the client ID. I also pointed to the URL there, but what you really need for the URL is the service app URL, right? And then from there, you can then call your URL, right? You can define your URL. This is using that full command line. All I'm going to do is go get data out of SMSR service, and I'm going to pipe out the values. So let me go show you how this works. Take a second because I think it has to load the PS auth module, but either way, it's going to go find that and look at. Now, another thing while this is working that I'll tell you, this script is running on a system that is not a config manager client of my infrastructure, right? It doesn't have to be at all. It just needs to have rights to be able to access the admin service as I talked about, and then we are good to go. So now that that module is basically loaded, we'll go forward and get the authentication dialog. Here it is. Let me log in with that STD user at my tenant. Cool. And then hit next. And password. And hit next. And so it takes it and we go forward. Let me bring this up a little bit. Go forward and the script runs. This will go away here in a second. So the script is running. With that, it's authorizing getting the access token from Azure AD, making sure that we have rights to config manager. And notice now we're dumping out all the data. Right? All the data is coming out for the systems that I asked for. And that is purely through the Cloud Management Gateway. I don't have access from this machine to do it directly. I'm not calling it the same way that I did with the on-prem AD. And so that is a quick example of using the Cloud Management Gateway over, or the admin service, sorry, over the internet. Works very well. So many possibilities that you can explore now, knowing that you can call the admin service either on-prem or the Cloud Management Gateway, no problem. So a couple of just additional things, questions maybe, can the Cloud Management Gateway be used with an admin service on a system without the Config Manager client? Yes, I just did it. Right? Doesn't need the config manager client. I'll call back to that scenario with the organization that's going to host config manager for a lot of folks. The way they get their service details and do their automation is through the admin service, but they don't have that automation running on-prem in all of those instances. They have it running through the Cloud Management Gateway, just like I showed you, to get the detail, interact with the service, and so on. And then another thing, what type of scenario might exist where it would be advantageous to use the admin service without the client? Well, that's the one I just told you with the company that's building the config manager hosting example. And then, all of the examples that I showed, I wouldn't say all, but most of the examples that I showed for on-prem, those are workable through the Cloud Management Gateway as well. The only difference is you would need to have authentication to make sure the user has the AD token, and then you would need to use the revised URL format. All that said, starting to wrap up. Troubleshooting tips and tricks. So a few things I want to kind of walk through and show you. In fact, I'll just pull in the lab as we start to wrap up. Logs, okay? So you've seen a couple of them already, right? I showed you the SMS REST provider log. So this basically is going to log the setup of the REST provider. Whenever I shifted certs, and let me actually go do that back now because I need to shift it back for some other things. So whenever I did this, right, and shifted certs, I'm going to go take this back to that one. Okay, and close. That didn't give me the warning I was expecting. Let me try to make sure I did the right one. Ah, that's why. This is the one. Role. Config. Yeah, that's what. So now I get the warning because of the trust not being there. And so that's cool. And so now I just need to go through the registry and restart the service again. So I'll show that to you. right? And then start. So that should have done it. We should be good. All right, and so the SMS underscore REST provider log will show the service and the health of the service and what's going on with the service. And just like I showed you before, this is going to show me now that I'm using the enhanced HTTP cert again for the service, right? So here it is. Here's the thumbprint, different thumbprint, successfully bound to the CCM cert. Issued cert hasn't been changed, so it is a config manager issued cert. And so that's that log. Then we have the REST provider setup.log. Let me go into, oops, not that one. Let me go into the logs here. We have the REST provider setup log, which will show you the setup of the REST provider, kind of intuitively. Now, I mentioned that the REST provider should be installed, running, no problem, automatically. But if yours isn't, then here's a good place to go see, did it actually get installed successfully or not? And then finally, the admin service. So this is where we interact with the admin service. We log all of that detail. I showed you this a couple of times already, but if you're using the admin service, this is a great place to go to see what the admin service did, that it did give a positive response, and so on, right? All right, so while we're here, we do have event log data. That's interesting. So let me pull up Event Viewer. So the detail that we care about is going to be under the application log. And oops, here we go. What we can do with the application log is we can filter the current log, and then we'll go focus in on the CM REST provider entries. Let me find that. CM, here we go, REST provider service. Hit OK. So we're good, and hit OK. And now we get no entries, which may not be bad. I did have this before, but they were errors. And so if I don't have errors, then I don't have any entries here. And so I'm good, right? But you can still go filter on that. You see the provider in the list and should be good to go. We've been in the registry already, but let me show you a couple of additional registry keys that are interesting. This one is under SMS Components, SMS Executive Threads, SMS REST Provider. So here's where I can start and stop the REST provider to pick up different cert changes or whatever it is, right? Now, in no particular order, let me just go over here and show you some additional options. I'll probably be back here and need to open this all again, but for now, let's close it. Under tracing here, I have the SMS REST provider. And you'll see, we have the options for debug logging and whether it's enabled, log level, all the stuff that should be familiar to the admin log, where that is, right? So these are just little options that you can interact with and change if you wanted to tweak them for logging in the REST provider. We also have up here a component, and I knew it'd be back here. Let me close that. A component SMS REST provider. Close that. Here, right, where you can see some detail, what database you're accessing, whether you want to allow CMG traffic, allow the REST provider, whatever these are, the SQL server name. Here's a really easy way to get the configurations. You can also go, so I showed you the one where you can stop and start the service, but there's one more. So under components and then the site component manager here, we have our component servers. So this would be where we would have our provider located, and then we could go down to components from there, and then we can find our REST provider component that is running on the server hosting the provider, right? And there's detail about that, right? Okay. So in terms of, I mentioned this runs as a service. You can certainly see it running here as a thread of the executive. Couple of details about the service. So if I go into the ConfigMgr install directory, right? So program files, ConfigMgr, and then go under bin x64. Then we have the CM REST provider folder. And these are the key files. Well, all of them are key, but here are the service files, right? And so you can actually see the REST provider running. If I go to Task Manager, you can search for SCCM under Details. So SCCM, I just had it. Scroll up there. Provider graph is the service running. So again, if yours isn't working, make sure that you actually have the service running here. And speaking of these, you see a config file. You can go through and see what all the config settings are for the REST provider service. Definitely don't change anything without being absolutely sure what you're going to change and why you're going to change it, right? But that's there. A question might come up, already mentioned it, but just to be sure, what happens if you install additional providers? Well, the answer is then every provider you install will have the ability to have the admin service accessed through it, right? And then the last thing that I'll show you here in the console is monitoring. So you can monitor the health of the provider with system status. So let me go to system status and then component status. And then under component status, we have the REST provider. Probably staring right past it. Let me EQR there. REST provider, we see that it's okay, but we can interact with this and get status messages for it just like we can anywhere else in the system and so on, right? So that's it. I mean, the REST provider, the admin service, same thing. Very, very powerful component of Config Manager, something that I think would solve many needs and that a lot of Config Manager admins will be interested in. The documentation that we have currently is not detailed enough, I don't think, to help folks understand all the usage scenarios. That's where, hopefully, this presentation, the blogs by Adam Gross and Sandy, so on, will be helpful. So with that, we will wrap it up, and I will just wish you happy admin service utilization, and we'll talk to you next time.